clothes because of the potential opportunities to conceal weapons and contraband. But they could still turn themselves out nicely, like Dinger. A final farewell look lingered between them as they said goodbye. Jeannie saw something in Jack's eyes and threw him a warning glance. CCTV was everywhere, and they'd kept their feelings for one another hidden from questioning stares. She was warning him not to let his guard down now, at the 11th hour, upon release, when finally they had the chance to meet up on freedom's terms. He got the message and turned away, taking in the view for one last time. He'd seen snippets of the desolate moor from his tiny cell window, and now he took in the whole thing and breathed the free air deeply. HMP Highton was an institution that not many folk knew about. Of course, if you lived within a 5-mile radius of the tiny village and shopped at the local co-op, then you'd be familiar with the high-security sprawl of concrete, metal and wire, built on peatland and heath, in between the rivers Esk and Urt. But the vast majority of the millions of visitors who crammed onto the Ravenglass Steam Railway every year, or hiked the Western Fells, had no idea. Neither did the tourists flocking to the nearby beaches on the coast of the Irish Sea. It existed in a bubble, sitting proudly on the ancient land that no one in their right mind would want to develop now. It'd be too expensive to dig adequate foundations into the edge of Halsenna Moor, and besides, it wouldn't be allowed. The wildlife habitat was protected. Back when the Victorians were looking for remote places to lock up their prisoners and forget about them, no one worried about preserving nature, just shooting, stuffing and framing it. So the prison had been built in 1843 and had stood on the windy, desolate moor ever since, welcoming some of Britain's worst offenders. The adult male population was made up of murderers, rapists, armed robbers and terrorists. Jeannie loved her job. She'd miss Jack Bell, though, brightening her shifts, though who knew where their relationship might go now that he was free. He was inside for armed burglary. He'd ended up in HMP Highton because the use of weapons had elevated the crime to Category A. Jeannie couldn't imagine Dinger being armed and dangerous. But then, most of the stories from the lads were the same. They were all in here because of some misunderstanding. Jeannie wasn't gullible or stupid. She knew the score. It's just that she saw the boys behind the men and felt empathy towards them, even the ones who refused to acknowledge their own humanity, burying it so it didn't make them weak. She still treated them the same. There were the real bad uns, of course, the ones who'd committed the worst crimes imaginable. Sometimes even Jeannie had trouble picturing some of the offences. But to her, they'd once been little boys, loved by their mothers and looking up to their papas. Along the way, something had gone wrong. With Dinger, it was his naive trust of folk that had got him into trouble, until he met Ricky Burton, who hunted for foot soldiers to do his bidding. During his 13-year stay at Highton, Dinger had clawed his way up the pecking order and created a comfortable life. He'd quickly worked out who was in charge and made the system work for himself, and he kept out of trouble. Dinger was street clever like that, and Jeannie watched how he observed those who'd put themselves in charge of the wings. Like Ricky. Prison wasn't much different to the outside, really, not when you look at it. It was an almighty test of survival, like a primary school playground. The only difference was that the physical boundaries were smaller, but the rules were the same. Dinger knew how to play the game, and thus he endured. Now, he was free of all that, and unchained, free of Ricky. But the prison population was changing. Some of the old rules were not just being bent, but broken entirely. And Jeannie noted a certain stench infiltrating the wings. More attacks on prison officers were being logged, and they'd become more sinister and well-planned. The atmosphere of the typical clink had developed into something altogether more violent and disrespectful lately, and Jeannie...